Hi there. Welcome to Afro Perspectives. Mnangagwa's proposed third term, Vision 2030, and the collapse of the education sector in Zimbabwe. If you are from elsewhere and have not been following Zimbabwean politics, Vision 2030 is just a set of goals set by the United Nations to eliminate things like poverty, hunger, and to improve health and education for the world's citizens. The target, like the name suggests, is the year 2030. Then there is Zimbabwe's bastardized version of Vision 2030, which has become a slogan for Emmerson Mnangagwa's plan for a third term. It is a blueprint for Emmerson Mnangagwa to rule the country from a wheelchair and lay the foundations for a political dynasty. Mnangagwa's Vision 2030 has nothing to do with the original version of the United Nations Vision 2030, and which is concerned with uplifting the people of Zimbabwe through alleviation of poverty and providing for such essentials as education and health. Instead, with Mnangagwa, the focus is on succeeding himself. His second 5-year term runs out in 2028 and he is supposed to step down. Mnangagwa is proposing to succeed himself. To do this, he needs to amend the constitution so he can run for a third term as president. There is no guarantee he will succeed, partly because an 86-year-old man with failing health has a limited life expectancy, and there is also resistance to the idea even from within his own party, ZANU-PF. Then there is Plan B if Emmerson Mnangagwa were to fail in getting a third term. That plan is to anoint a trusted figure. That trusted figure is Kudata Gwirei. In late April, he was elevated, that is Kudata Gwirei, he was elevated to ZANU-PF's Politburo, the party's highest organ of decision-making, and he is lined up as a possible successor to Emmerson Mnangagwa himself. Long before there was Wicknell Chiwayo, the Zimbabwean government's favorite businessman was Kudakwashe Tagwirei, nicknamed Queen Bee because of his connections to the political elite, especially President Emmerson Mnangagwa. Emmerson Mnangagwa, if he were to fail to rule beyond 2028, he has a plan. And that plan is giving the presidency to Tagwirei. Consider this. Tagwirei, on his Wikipedia page, he is described as a business tycoon and founder of Sakunda Holdings. I have no personal vendetta against Tagwirei. I have no beefs with Queen Bee. I think he is just a sophisticated and polished version of Wicknell Chiwayo. In 2013, Sakunda got a monopoly to supply fuel to the whole of Zimbabwe. However, the real entity supplying petroleum products to Zimbabwe was a Swiss-based company called Trafigura, and Tagwirei was just a front being paid fees by Trafigura for access to the political elite in Zimbabwe. Then consider that in 2021, Parliament found that Tagwirei's company Sakunda Holdings had plundered nearly 1.5 billion in US dollars meant for the Command Agriculture Scheme. Some estimates put the actual figure looted by Tagwirei's company at 3.5 billion US dollars. It is no accident that Tagwirei comes from Shurugwi in the Midlands province and he is homeboy to Mnangagwa. Putting Tagwirei in the line of succession is Mnangagwa's insurance plan. The loot Mnangagwa has acquired over the past 5 years will be safe if Tagwirei becomes president. The crimes his sons have committed will not be looked into. So maybe I should go back to Vision 2030 and not the plan by Mnangagwa to succeed himself or to anoint Tagwirei as his successor, but the original United Nations Vision 2030. By hijacking the UN goals on development, the political elite in Zimbabwe just highlights how cruel and how uncaring they are. On the other hand, you have rampant corruption with so-called business tycoons plundering public coffers billions in hard currency through favored access to tenders. And then you have crumbling public infrastructure. And these, the billions looted by the likes of Tagwirei and Chiwayo and Scott Sakupanya and those, the so-called Ziganandas, these are the funds needed to run schools, clinics and hospitals. Elsewhere, I've done a YouTube video where I have documented the collapse of the public hospitals under the weight of ZANU-PF's looting of public coffers. Take for instance the state of Zimbabwe schools. That clip I have loaded on screen shows school kids. You can see for yourself that these are kids in uniform, and that lady is dignified in those humiliating circumstances. How do we justify such levels of poverty in a country with such abundant resources? And how do we justify the plunder of resources when children are taking classes in mud huts? In case you might think those are just random images from elsewhere in Africa, I will attach school names to the images. And that one there is Siashilava Secondary School in Binga. Forgive for employing such a term, but in Zimbabwe, Binga is the Wild West. It has more than 50 schools like Siashilava Secondary School where students attend classes in open air during the rainy season. The plunder of the country's resources by the likes of Chiwayo has negative consequences in the real world. If you take schools as a benchmark for the development, say, of a district or a province, Binga is the district paying a heavy price for the plunder of public funds. Consider in 2022 that 18 schools in Binga failed even to get one student to score just 5 ordinary level passes. And Chiwayo can afford luxury cars such as the Rolls Royce you see in that picture on there. And he can afford to fly in chartered jets and pay $500,000 US in lobola, squandering the country's resources on profligate spending while kids, the very future of Zimbabwe, are taking classes under mango trees. Mnangagwa's government has reduced Zimbabwe to the status of some kind of a joke. Take Chiwayo himself. In 2004, Chiwayo was sentenced to jail for defrauding 6 people for 2 million in South African rand. Yet Mnangagwa's government sees it fit to present Chiwayo to the rest of Africa as representing the business elite in Zimbabwe. There you can see him with Kenya's President William Ruto. Then on that other clip, he is enjoying the company of President Samia Hassan of Tanzania. If you take Chiwayo, then you go on to Tagwirei and the likes of Scott Sakupanya. These are the privileged elite. In any ordinary country, you talk of captains of industry, but in Zimbabwe, these are nothing but a parasitic elite who survive on a rigged public procurement regime. We have a political elite that channels public resources to the likes of Chiwayo. Consider this. In the past 7 or so days, we have seen lecturers and professors from Zimbabwe's most prestigious institution of higher learning, the University of Zimbabwe, take to the picketing lines. They are striking. For those who are academically gifted, landing the role of a professor is the ultimate achievement. And these are people who have studied up to a doctoral degree. If you take the 3 years of an undergraduate degree, then another year doing a master's degree, and top up that with another 3 years for a doctorate, then you are talking of 7 years post A-levels studying, and to get what? Just $230 per month. So this is what Zimbabwe has been reduced to. The laughingstock of Africa, of Southern Africa. As it stands right now, Zimbabwe owes international creditors close to $18 billion US. Most governments with their citizens' interests at heart would borrow money to build infrastructure, things like hydroelectric plants and highways. But in Zimbabwe, that 18 billion is money squandered on the likes of Chiwenga through rigged tenders. This translates to 34,000 US dollars per person. And in everyday life, this means that after the Zimbabwe government has finished off paying its debts to whoever they borrowed money from, there is little to pay for hospitals and schools. Consider this: an average family in Zimbabwe consists of 4 children and their parents. On a monthly basis, such a family needs an average of US $495 just to meet the basics. Those basics translate to rent, school fees for the kids, and groceries. Maybe slavery is a sensitive word to use, especially when it comes to describing exploited public servants. But in Zimbabwe, this is the reality for teachers whose wages are exhausted on paying just for rent and food. Lecturers at the UZ get half of that figure, that is the 495 I've just spoke about above, which you need, say, per month to get by. And they just earn 230 US dollars, and most of them can now no longer afford to send even their kids to boarding schools. Teachers at secondary school and primary schools are faring even worse. They are just getting about 150 US dollars a month. So this is where we are. For the rest of Africa, Vision 2030 means building schools for kids, building hospitals, and making sure that citizens enjoy a dignified life and opportunities for self-improvement. But in Zimbabwe under Mnangagwa, Mnangagwa has managed to impose a bastardized version of Vision 2030, whose sole purpose is putting in place the blueprint for his family dynasty. You have Blessed Geza labeling the parasitic tenderpreneurs like Chiwenga and Scott Sakupanya Zigananda, and that would translate to English as the business mafia. That is all okay. The problem with this Zigananda narrative is that it is ZANU-PF that created such a problem in the first place. For those who are familiar with factionalism in fighting in ZANU-PF, Geza proposes that the solution lies in Constantino Chiwenga taking over as president. But then Chiwenga has never been voted by anyone. He is an imposition. This is the guy who has been responsible for setting aside the results of elections from 2008 to the last one in 2023. The man who has stolen the hopes of generations of Zimbabweans. And Geza himself is not fighting for a better future for the generality of Zimbabweans. What he is fighting for is a seat on the gravy train. The Zimbabwe we need and the Zimbabwe we want is a Zimbabwe where teachers and nurses are paid decent wages, a fair deal for everyone. A Zimbabwe where the government devotes money to build schools and hospitals for fellow citizens. Getting Chiwenga to succeed Mnangagwa is simply shuffling the deck chairs on a sinking Titanic. Anyway, anyone who wants a fair Zimbabwe should fight for fair and free and transparent elections. Take, for instance, a little uncontested fact. The late Morgan Tsvangirai won 73% of the vote in 2008. And then repeated the same thing in 2013. Then Chamisa beat Mnangagwa in 2018 and 2023. There was just no one to announce the winner. The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission and its head, Priscilla Chigumba, are part and parcel of the ZANU-PF election rigging machine. Thank you for following this piece, and if you have found this analysis useful, please give me some likes and don't forget to subscribe. And if there is anything I've got wrong or missed to mention, please drop your comments in the box below. Thank you. Bye.